The things that I just say is you're better off nearly having the realization first, and then kind of trying to understand it, because trying to understand it first is just a block. It's just all you have is a concept, and you have some sort of a idea of what it's going to be like, and then when if and when it does happen for you, it then, you're like, well, that's not what I read about, and it's different, and therefore you kind of discredit your own realization. Oh, well, it's not the way I read about it in by this person in their book, therefore mine must not be a real realization. That's not the case. But I know we talk about it quite a lot. I know some people are really interested in it, but honestly, right, what they should really be concentrating on is the very first shift. What is myself? What is it? Where did it come from? Where is it located? How do I access it? How do I stay in it? That's what should be, you know. But I know all the other states are very kind of, they sound very exotic and exciting, and people want to talk about them and hear all about them. Hey guys, but I think basically people should have the realization, obviously some knowledge, but not to get caught up in it completely. It's unique to you, Becky. Your body mind is different, your nervous system is different, everything is different from the next person. Everything is different. It can't be the same, experience. There's definite shifts, and there's similarities in them that everyone can kind of like, okay, yes, that makes sense to me. I can sense the self. That seems to be the substratum of all the awakenings, is we realize the self, or the self realizes itself. But then there's everything else is very kind of subjective and changes for everybody. And yeah, we read the books, we get the kind of a picture of Eckhart and how self-realization should be, and I should be sitting on a bench for a year, drooling on myself, not knowing my own name. And it's not like that. It was just like that for him because it was such a dramatic shift. From going from manic depressive to self-realization, in one click. Yeah, and a lot of Eckhart's teaching is just practicing the power of now. It's not self-realization. It's witnessing. It's very it's very, you can't teach self-realization to someone, but you can teach presence and witnessing. Yeah, I feel that Eckhart is very good just for the average person looking to kind of have more presence in their life, come out of having an overactive mind, anxiety, stress. Anyone can practice the power of now. You just become aware of, you just start to watch your thoughts, and then all of a sudden, gaps start to open up and presence starts to come in. That's practicing the power of now. So there's a definite shift from ignorance to self-realization. Okay, and that shift is the awareness becomes, it's not the intellect realizing that it's the awareness. It's the awareness waking up to the reality of itself. There's a difference. Well, the self becomes aware of itself. It's not witnessing, and it's not the intellect realizing that it has this presence. That's different. The intellect can go, okay, I can sense this awareness. I am that awareness. That's not self-realization. That's your intellect having a sense of that. Self-realization is when the self or the soul collapses, the witness collapses, and it turns around and looks back in on itself. It wakes up to itself, and that's a snap. That's something that happens in one click, and that's it. There's no going back. So so there's another phase where that self then starts to look outwards, and it starts to see itself outside in the reality. So it's a kind of an opening up, and it's usually more in the heart. So it's like, oh, I am the sunset, right? You look out, you get a sense that you are that sunset, but it's felt on the heart. Whereas unity is through the intellect. Unity is unity is basically that the self and what's outside of itself, the separation disappears, and it all just becomes one, basically. But it's a realization through the intellect. It's, oh, I am one with everything. I am one with my surroundings. I am in unity. So okay, the person doesn't become enlightened. Okay, Eric, that's the main thing. You don't get enlightenment. So at your core, right? There's this sort of cave, we'll call it, right? And it's awareness, it's presence, it's peace, it's unbounded. It doesn't die. It was never born, and that's at what you are at your core. Okay, that's at the nucleus. Okay, and on the outside is Eric. Okay, with your mind, with your intellect, with your body. Okay, and basically what self-realization is that soul awakens to the reality of itself. It's not you that's having the realization of it. That's just your intellect reading about it and having a concept and an idea. The soul wakes up, or the self wakes up to itself. So at the moment, okay, so for instance, when you, I think last week you spoke about doing self-inquiry. Self-inquiry, so basically our senses go outwards during the day. We like nice things, we want, cake, we want to listen to nice music, everything is going outwards. When you do self-inquiry, that's focusing your attention back in on itself, right? And basically that's where you want to bring your attention, is inwards. And you're trying to sense that self at the core of what you are. In the beginning, there's ignorance. There's identification with the body, with the mind. You as a person that exists within the world, right? And your consciousness is there because you have a mind and a brain. And if your brain dies, consciousness dies, right? That's not true, okay? So that's literally most people on the planet. Then comes witnessing, where you start doing self-inquiry, you start practicing this sort of sensing into that place, and it comes to the foreground and it kind of looks in on your life. Kind of gaps start to come in between the thoughts, and the mind starts to quieten down, and this presence starts to come forward, and you can sense that, and you can feel it, and it feels really nice and it feels peaceful. But that's not self-realization either. That's just witnessing. So in self-realization, the witness collapses. It stops witnessing, and it turns around and it witnesses itself. It basically goes from looking in on you to turning around and looking back on itself. And then it realizes itself, and that's what self-realization is. The person doesn't realize the self realizes itself. It awakens to the reality of itself. So there's lots of people who read books and they have an intellectual understanding of what that is. But that's not it. That's not self-realization. That's your intellect learning about it, and the intellect can be really clever, and it can learn all the non-dual terminology and words, but that's not it. Soul at its core is just peace. It's awareness. It's just potential. It's not doing anything. It's just awake to itself. Okay, it has nothing to do with the intellect, with the mind. That basically what happens every time you die, right? The soul stays, and the intellect and the personality crumble. And each time you come back in, you get a new one. But your soul and the quality of your consciousness stays with you every time. Sure. So basically, the soul is just presence, awareness, and that's what you are at the core. and for it to be realized, something has to click to make it aware of itself. I don't buy into that, Eric. That's yeah. I don't. Yeah. There's always more. There's no end game enlightenment where you just don't, you just merge back in. I'm not saying that's not possible. I'm just saying, most people who start to awaken and start to go through all the different levels of consciousness and awakening, they keep reincarnating. They keep coming back to even if it's just to help others, Eric. There's no consciousness. It needs to evolve to keep itself moving, right? And we are its parts. We are the parts that keep it moving. So if it needs to keep evolving, then basically, what use are we to it if we just merge back in with it? Possible, but again, right? When everything becomes to that level, the learning stop, and what'll happen, it'll probably start up a new simulation for us to start all over again. Well, that's the fun, Andrew. You keep coming back in, you have to try and work it out. It gets harder and harder and harder. Exactly. Yeah. And that's why we're honestly, and what happens is, so basically at the core, right, is that self. That's static, but the being is dynamic. It keeps, that's you have this kind of interactive player, which is Eric. Okay, so Eric is the one that's kind of maneuvering in the game, whereas the soul stays the same. The soul doesn't really evolve. It kind of just stays the same. The soul is a teardrop from the Brahman, which is outside of creation. It comes down. Now you also have the mind of God, which is part Brahman, part in creation, right? And your beingness, which is like Eric, your intuition, your free will, you are also a spark of that. So you're a spark of the Brahman, and you're a spark of the God, the Krishna, the mind of God, whatever you want to call it, and both are contained within what you are. Yes, direct experience. You have to enter them states. You have to be them. So I've entered Brahman, and I've also entered the mind of God. So I've experienced both. It's just, that's what you are then. So it's like for instance, Brahman. There's a part of me here, right? And there's a part of me that's aware in Brahman, right? I am the Brahman. So it's like, it feels like I'm here and I'm outside of creation in this primordial consciousness. Now, the Supreme Being, that descends down. There's an intelligence in the Supreme Being. It's different from Brahman. And that intelligence can descend down and look out through my eyes. And it can witness itself in everything. Well. So the light transmission is perception-wise. It's where Shaktipat is the body. Is enlightenment through the body, bliss. That's what's happening. Kundalini is then rewiring the body. So they work on different parts of it. So you don't want just to have the perceptions. You don't want to just have the self realize itself. You want to have the body. You want to have bliss. You want to have Shakti. You want to have love. So the self is just awareness. It's just stillness. There's no love in it. There's no bliss in it. The bliss is in the being. Bliss is in God. The love is in God. We're both the self, and we're both God.